The rain came down in sheets, hard enough to erase the world. Streetlights in downtown Seattle flickered through the downpour like ghosts, and the sidewalks gleamed with the reflections of passing headlights. Midnight had come and gone, but the city still breathed, cars hissing through puddles, neon bleeding down wet glass. Mara Delaney stumbled out of the alley, clutching her side. Her coat was soaked, the cold biting straight through to her bones. The blood mixed with the rain, pooling darkly between her fingers. She didn't know where the knife had come from, or the man who'd wielded it, only that he'd smiled when he said her name. She made it 3 steps onto the slick street before her knees gave out. The asphalt was cold against her cheek. The world spun, red lights, sirens far away, thunder rolling in the distance. She thought she heard footsteps. Heavy, slow, then a voice. Low, rough, like gravel soaked in whiskey. Not yet, little one. She forced her eyes open. A man knelt beside her in the rain. His hair was black and wild, his jaw rough with a few days' stubble. Water dripped down the line of his neck. His eyes, his eyes, glowed faintly amber in the dark, not with reflection, but with light of their own. He pressed his hand against her wound. The heat of him seared through her clothes. She tried to push him away, but her body wouldn't move. "Stay with me," he said. "You're not leaving me like this." Her voice came out a whisper. Who are you?" He didn't answer. His palm glowed faintly against her side, and she felt something surge through her. Warmth, light, power that didn't belong in this world. The pain faded, replaced by an impossible stillness. When she looked down, the blood was gone. The wound had closed. Her breath caught. "How?" He leaned closer, rain dripping from his lashes. "You're safe. For now." "Safe from what?" His gaze shifted toward the alley she'd crawled from. Lightning split the sky, and for an instant she saw it, a shadow standing at the far end. Tall. Wrong. Its eyes reflected red. The stranger growled, low, animal, terrifying. The shadow vanished. "What was that?" she asked, her voice trembling. He stood, his movements too fluid, too precise. "You don't want to know." She struggled to her feet, gripping the side of a street lamp. "I just almost died. I deserve to know something." His jaw tightened. "If I tell you, you'll never sleep again. Try me." He looked at her for a long moment, the rain dripping between them like a curtain. Then finally, "It wasn't a man. It was one of mine. Yours. I'm not like you." The words came with a strange finality, as though they were a confession he'd been avoiding for centuries. She stared at him. "You mean what? Like a cult? A gang?" He almost smiled. "Something older." Lightning flashed again, and for a second his outline changed, not by much, but enough. Broader shoulders, sharper teeth, the hint of something wild beneath his skin. Her breath caught. "What are you?" "Something you weren't supposed to see." He turned to leave, but she caught his arm. "Wait, you saved me." He looked down at her hand, rain glistening on his skin. "I had to." "Why?" He hesitated. "Because you're marked." Her pulse stumbled. "Marked? By what?" "Not what?" he said quietly. "Who?" Before she could ask, he pulled free and started down the street, his steps silent even on the flooded pavement. "Hey," she called after him. "You can't just—" But he was already gone. The rain swallowed him whole. By morning, the city was washed clean, though the storm still lingered over the bay. Mara sat in her apartment across from Pike Place Market, staring at the faint scar on her ribs where the knife had gone in. It didn't make sense. She'd been bleeding out. She'd seen her own blood on the pavement. And that voice. "Not yet, little one." It echoed in her head, deep and sure, threaded with something ancient. She tried to tell herself she'd hallucinated it. That shock had played tricks on her. But every time she touched her side, she could still feel the warmth of his hand. That afternoon, she went back to the alley. The police had taped it off, but there was no blood, no sign of struggle, no weapon, only the faint scent of metal and rain, and something else she couldn't name. She turned to leave, and stopped. A single black feather lay in the gutter, glistening under the gray light. It wasn't from any bird she knew. Too long, too sleek, and when she picked it up, it burned faintly in her palm before fading to ash. That night, the nightmares began. She dreamed of forests under a full moon, of men running on four legs, of eyes like fire glinting through the fog. She saw a crown made of bones, and a man kneeling in the rain, his face hidden by shadow. When she woke, her bedsheets were damp, her heartbeat thundering in her throat, and on her wrist, faint but real, a new mark had appeared, a small crescent, etched into her skin like a scar. 3 days later, he came back. She was locking up the bookstore where she worked, the streets quiet except for the hum of tires on wet asphalt. She felt him before she saw him, a change in the air, a pulse in the back of her neck. When she turned, he was standing across the street under the flickering light of a lamppost. The same dark coat, the same impossible stillness. "Are you following me now?" she called. His voice carried easily over the rain. "You're in danger." "I've noticed." He crossed the street, the scent of pine, and something wilder following him. "You shouldn't have gone back to that alley. You healed me. You disappeared. I had questions." He stopped inches away from her. The rain fell harder between them, but neither moved. "You won't like the answers. Try me." He sighed, his breath fogging in the cold. "They'll come for you again. The one who marked you isn't finished." Her pulse quickened. "Who marked me?" He looked at her wrist, at the crescent faintly glowing there. His jaw tightened. "The Blood Moon Order. They think you belong to them." "Belong," she repeated. "They marked you for claiming. You weren't supposed to survive." Her voice trembled. "And you, what are you in all this?" "I'm the reason you did." Lightning flashed, and this time she saw him clearly. The faint lines of scars across his chest, the golden light pulsing faintly beneath his skin. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "When they realize you're still alive, they'll come for you, and they won't stop." She swallowed hard. "Then help me stop them." His eyes softened, almost human. "You don't understand what you're asking. I'm already in it. Teach me, or let me die." For a long moment, only the rain answered. Then quietly, "You don't die tonight." "Why not?" "Because the king forbids it." Her voice caught. "The king." His gaze met hers, burning gold. "The Lycan king." A chill went through her. "That's me." The words fell between them like thunder. She stepped back. "No. There's no such thing." He smiled sadly. "There wasn't. Not until you were marked." The wind picked up, scattering rain down the empty street. He turned toward the harbor, the light from the ferries flickering against his face. "You've changed everything," he said, "and now the blood moon will rise again. Then what happens to me?" He looked at her, truly looked at her, and in that gaze, she saw something ancient, broken, and infinite. "You become mine." And before she could move, before she could speak, lightning lit the sky, and he vanished into the rain. Mara stood there, soaked and trembling, her pulse still echoing with the ghost of his words. Not yet, little one. But something deep in her bones already knew. The next time he came for her, she wouldn't be dying. She'd be changing. The rain didn't stop for days. It came in waves that blurred the city into watercolor, gray skyline, silver streets, faces behind fog cafe windows that all looked the same. But the nights were different now. The wind carried something with it, something alive, ancient, and watching. Mara felt it in her blood. She told herself she was fine. She went to work. She smiled for customers at the bookstore, even laughed when Lila, her co-worker and best friend, teased her about looking haunted in a hot, gothic heroine kind of way. But every night, she woke at exactly 2:37 a.m., and every night, the mark on her wrist glowed faintly beneath the sheets. Sometimes she thought she heard a low growl under the rain, or footsteps in the alley behind her building. And once, she dreamed of him again, the stranger, the Lycan king, kneeling beside her in the storm, his hand pressed over her heart. "Not yet, little one," he whispered again, but this time there was sorrow in his voice. "Not until you know what you are." When she woke, her window was open, and there were wet footprints on her floor. By Friday, she couldn't take it anymore. She searched for him, Seattle was a maze of wet streets and quiet corners, of ferries cutting through gray water and forests pressing close against the city's edge. If he was real, if any of it was, he had to be somewhere out there, hiding in plain sight. So she followed the pull. The mark on her wrist burned like a compass when she reached the edge of Discovery Park. The rain was lighter here, more like mist, and the air smelled of cedar and salt. The forest swallowed the sound of the city completely. She climbed the hill to an abandoned lighthouse that stood alone against the gray sea. And there he was. He stood on the rocks below, barefoot, the tide washing around his ankles. His coat was gone. His shirt clung to him, soaked, the fabric torn across his shoulder. He looked less like a man now and more like something caught between human and storm. "You shouldn't have come," he said without turning. She ignored the warning, her voice shaking. "I've been looking for you." He finally looked up. His eyes glowed brighter than the moonlight on the water. "And you found me. Congratulations. Now leave. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening to me." He sighed, dragging a hand through his wet hair. "You wouldn't believe me. I saw you heal me. I watched you disappear into the rain. Try me." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "You're marked by the Blood Moon Order. They don't mark humans unless they have a reason." "What reason?" "Because you're the key to something they want," he said. "Something old. Something that belongs to me." Her pulse quickened. "You keep saying things like that. What does it mean?" He stepped closer. The air between them tightened. The wind shifted, and she caught that same scent, rain, pine, and something darker, wilder. "It means you're not just some unlucky girl who got caught in the wrong alley," he said softly. "You're part of this now, bound by blood. My blood." Her breath caught. "Your blood." He reached toward her, slow enough that she could have stopped him, but she didn't. His fingers brushed the mark on her wrist, and the world seemed to tilt. For a heartbeat, she saw flashes, silver forests, moonlight on fur, red skies, and a throne carved of stone and bone. Then, a crown of claws resting on his head. She jerked her hand back, gasping. "What was that?" His expression darkened. "Memory. Mine. You touched the bond." "So you're saying, I'm linked to you?" He nodded once. "You carry my mark. That means the blood moon can reach you through me." She stared at him, rain sliding down her face. "Then take it back." His jaw clenched. "It doesn't work that way. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to save you," he snapped, then stopped, the anger collapsing into something softer. "But I did." They stood there, the waves crashing at their feet, the silence between them louder than thunder. "Finally," she said, "at least tell me your name." He hesitated. "Kaylin." Mara breathed it like it was something she already knew. "Kaylin." He stepped back, his gaze still locked on her. "If they find out you're alive, they'll come for you. You have to leave the city." "And go where?" He looked toward the dark forest behind her. "North, into the Cascades. There's a place beyond the old logging roads. No one goes there anymore. Wait for me there." She frowned. "Why would I trust you?" "Because you already do." She didn't remember driving north. Only the rhythm of rain on the windshield, the wipers keeping time with her heartbeat, the name Kaylin echoing in her head like a song she'd forgotten the words to. By nightfall she reached the foothills, a narrow cabin road swallowed by trees and mist. She stopped when she saw the first flicker of movement in her headlights, eyes, dozens of them, watching. She stepped out, clutching the flashlight she'd taken from her glove compartment. "Hello." The beam cut through the fog and landed on a man's face. Not Kaylin. His eyes were red. He smiled, showing teeth too sharp to be human. "You shouldn't be here, little one." The world slowed. Before she could react, a blur of motion came from behind. A snarl, a crash of bodies. Kaylin hit the creature like a storm. The fight was fast, brutal. Bones cracked, claws tore bark from trees. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face twisted in something both savage and protective. When it was over, Kaylin stood panting over the broken body of the attacker, his chest heaving. His hands were slick with blood, his eyes glowing gold. He looked at her, wild, shaking, beautiful in the most terrifying way. "You see now why I told you to run." Mara took a step forward, her voice trembling. "You killed him." "He wasn't alive the way you think," Kalen said, wiping his hands on his torn sleeve. "He was already claimed by the Order." She wanted to back away, to run, but something in his face stopped her. The exhaustion, the sorrow. "They'll send more," he said. "You have to stay hidden until the blood moon rises." "And what happens when it does?" He met her gaze, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That's when the bond completes." "What does that mean?" He looked away. "It means you stop being human." Later, when the fire was burning low inside the cabin he'd found for her, Kalen sat by the window, his silhouette framed by rain. "Mara couldn't sleep. If the Order wants me dead," she said quietly, "why do I feel like I've known them my whole life?" He turned slightly, the firelight glinting in his eyes. "Because you have." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Your father was one of them," he said. "He tried to leave. They killed him for it." The air left her lungs. "You're lying." "I wish I was." He rose and walked to her, kneeling in front of where she sat today. "You were born under a blood moon, Mara. Your father begged me to protect you before they took him. That's why I found you. Why I couldn't let you die." Her hands trembled. "You knew my father?" He nodded once. "And I failed him." Silence filled the room, heavy, alive, unbearable. Finally, she whispered, "What happens now?" Kalen's gaze softened, though the storm still burned behind his eyes. "Now we wait, and you learn to survive what you're becoming." Outside, thunder rolled again over the mountains. The firelight flickered, dancing across his face. Mara stared at him, her voice barely a whisper. "And if I can't?" He looked at her like she was both his curse and his salvation. "Then I'll make sure you don't die alone." The rain softened to a long, patient whisper against the cabin roof, the kind of steady fall that seeps into wood and bone and thought. Night pressed up to the windows like a living thing, and the pines out back moved in slow silhouettes, their wet needles shining when lightning stitched a pale seam across the mountains. Mara sat cross-legged on the braided rug near the hearth, her palms hovering over the fire until the heat stung. The crescent on her wrist pulsed in time with the embers, a low, tidal glow like breath under skin. She could feel the forest now, as if the dark had nerves and they all ran straight to her. Kalen watched from the chair by the window, one shoulder braced against the frame, his outline carved in ember light. He'd cleaned the blood from his hands, but not all of it had come away. A faint rust traced the cuticles, stained the half-moon beds of his nails. The scars across his chest caught the fire, throwing small, jagged shadows along his ribs. "Don't stare at it," he said. "That makes it stronger." She looked up. "What does?" "The mark. You feed it attention. It feeds you hunger." "I'm not hungry." His lips twitched. "Not yet." A gust of wind rattled the eaves. The door hinges creaked as if remembering storms older than this one. Mara rubbed her wrist, searching for warmth that didn't belong to the mark. "Tell me about the Order," she said. "Tell me why they want me, and why you care." He didn't speak right away. Outside, the rain changed direction, slanting hard against the glass, and somewhere farther down the ridge a branch gave way with a crack like a shoulder dislocating. Finally, he said, "There are old vows under these mountains, older than Seattle, older than logging roads and survey lines. The Blood Moon Order was born to keep those vows. Somewhere along the way, they decided they were the vow." "Guardians turned zealots," she said. "Yes." His gaze drifted to her wrist. "They mark those who carry the right blood. Yours is right in a way they haven't seen in a generation." She swallowed. "Because of my father." The fire popped. Kalen flinched almost imperceptibly at the word father, like it was a shard in his throat. "He was one of them," Kalen said. "Not by choice at the end. He ran. And people who run from the Order either vanish or are made lessons." "How do you know?" He exhaled, a sound like a door opening on the memory. "Because I found him. Because he asked me to keep you out of the rain." The room seemed to tilt, slow and inevitable, like a fairy leaning into a turn. "You were there," she said. My father spoke to you?" Kaelin nodded once. He was hurt, the kind of hurt that doesn't heal. He knew the Order had scented you. He asked me to be what I am. A monster. He didn't flinch. A wall. Mara stared at the fire until it blurred. She didn't remember her father's voice, only the shape of his absence, birthdays with an empty chair, a door that never opened at night. She remembered rain. Always rain. What did he ask you to do? Whatever it took. Kaelin's voice dropped. Even if that meant binding you to me. Mara's head snapped up. The room tightened, the air thinner. You bound me? That night in Seattle. Not there. He interrupted, pained. Before. Years ago. You were small. The Order had come close to finding you. Your mother put you in a car and ran. I smelled them before she did. The floor gave under her, for a second. The windows, the fire, Kaelin's face, all slid a fraction of an inch, as if the cabin were a photograph shaken loose in the wind. You saved me before. He nodded, every line of him set, as if bracing for impact. I found a wreck at the bottom of a ditch near Skycomish. Night. Freezing rain. Your mother had a broken arm. You were strapped in the back seat, crying so hard you could barely pull air. The Order had marked the road with iron. They were coming back. Mara's mouth went dry. She could hear it now, a ghost of sound under the storm, the warping scream of metal, her mother's hands, the smell of gasoline and cold. I don't remember. You weren't meant to, he said softly, but I did what I swore. I put my hand on your chest, and I said, not yet, little one. I gave you a thread of me, enough to keep you awake and hidden, the kind of binding that only wakes under a blood moon. Her palm flattened against her sternum like her body wanted proof. You said the words the night in Seattle. They were the same storm, he said, only this time you heard them. The fire sank lower, a bed of coals, with a thin orange skin. The room cooled. Mara's skin pimpled along her forearms. The crescent on her wrist brightened as if to keep her warm. So this bond, you and me, it wasn't an accident. Nothing about you is, Kaelin said. The Order planned to claim you. I planned to keep you alive long enough to choose. Choose what? His eyes met hers, gold barely contained. Whether you stay human, whether you become mine. The word mine landed in her chest like a fist and a kiss at the same time. She hated it. She needed it. She didn't know which was truer. That's the price, she asked, voice thin. My life for my life? Lightning flared, turning the windows white. After, darkness rushed back in, deeper than before. Kaelin rose and fed another log to the fire with a care that looked like prayer. Every bond carries a cost, he said. Your body will run hot. Your hunger will grow teeth. The first full change rips you from the inside out. You'll smell lies, and you'll taste fear in the air. You'll hear the truth in my silence. And you will never be alone again, not even inside your head. Mara breathed in and felt the room, the ridge, the wet world beyond, layers she hadn't known existed, now unfurling like maps. The thought of never being alone again made something unclench and something else panic. And if I refuse, then the Order will take what I gave you and turn it into a collar. They'll use the bond to pull you into their night and make you their instrument. His jaw worked once, restrained fury. I have seen what they make. I will not watch them make it out of you. The wind shifted. A smell slid under the door, copper, wet fur, cold iron hammered underwater. Kaelin froze. His head tilted, the tendons in his neck standing out like cables. They're near, he said. How near? His eyes went gold past human. Close enough to hear your heartbeat. The cabin light died, not the fire, but the small lamp on the table. A hush fell over the ridge, the kind that isn't silence, but a held breath, a pause before teeth close. Mara's skin prickled. Her lungs decided to forget how to breathe, then remembered in a rush. What do we do? Kaelin's mouth twitched once toward a smile that wasn't a smile at all. We teach you to listen. He moved in front of her, palms raised, not touching. Close your eyes. She did. The dark behind her lids was a river. Listen to the storm, he said. Not the big sound. The small ones. Count them. She tried. Rain on roof. Drip at gutter. A mouse under the sink maybe. The tick of heat lifting from wood. And beneath it all, something like a drum under the floorboards, the ridge's slow heart. Now the metal, he said. Where is it? She tilted her head, without meaning to. The smell of iron came from her left, not the door, but lower, at the seam where the wall met the floor. The crawl space, she whispered. Good. They've pushed iron stakes into the ground around us, to damp the bond. They think they're clever. He stepped closer, voice a rasp in the dark. What else? She breathed again, and the world opened another layer. A footstep in wet needles. Another. A body brushing bark. The soft whine of something sharp pulled free of leather. She swallowed. 3, she said. No, 4. 1 heavier. 2 legs. 1 moves wrong. Wounded, Kalen said. Probably the one I left breathing as a warning. They always misunderstand manners. He crossed to the door and slid the latch without sound. Mara's heart climbed too high in her throat. The mark on her wrist burned cold now, like ice with fire buried inside. Don't open it, she hissed. I'm not, he said. They are. The door didn't so much swing as ease inward, inch by careful inch, as if the night itself were pushing. Rain smell broke across the room. A figure filled the doorway, tall, soaked, a hood dripping along its brow. When it raised its head, its eyes were a wrong red, refracting the hearth light, like blood behind glass. Pretty hearth, the figure said, voice light, almost pleasant. Mind if we warm our hands? Kalen didn't move. You brought iron to a wood house. Either you're new or you're foolish. The figure smiled, calm as a realtor. Sarah Whitlock, she said, as if introducing herself at a holiday party. Marshal of the Blood Moon Order, Puget Sound Chapter. Her gaze flicked to Mara, resting there with an interest that felt like fingers on a throat. And you must be the little miracle that refuses to die. Mara stood before she knew she meant to. I don't belong to you. Sarah's smile didn't change. You belong to the moon the way a tide does, darling. It isn't bondage, it's physics. Her eyes slid back to Kalen. Hand her over, your majesty, and I'll leave your roof unburned. Thunder rolled low enough to rattle the glass. Kalen's voice came back quiet and terrible. The last time your order set fire to a ridge in my territory, I fed you to the creek one by one and let the salmon debate your names. Sarah's pleasantness cracked by a hair. The king tells stories. He keeps ledgers, Kalen said. They stood a moment for breaths, 5. Sarah's gaze returned to Mara's wrist, and the interest sharpened into hunger. She's carrying more of you than I expected, Sarah said. How generous. It will make the rite faster. Mara's skin crawled. What rite? The hollowing, Sarah said brightly. We pour out the parts that get in the way. Fear, doubt, self. Fill you up with purpose. Imagine never aching. Imagine being nothing but sharp. Kalen stepped forward, the room shrinking around his shoulders. If you come closer, he said, I will take your throat before you can say amen. Sarah lifted her hands, palms empty. We don't have to be unkind. There's an easier way. 2 nights from now, the blood moon rises. Let the bond complete. When it does, bring her to Discovery Park, the lighthouse. We'll take off your crown with care. Kalen's laugh had no humor. You mistake me for a man who fears the weight of gold. Sarah's eyes cooled. I mistake you for a creature who knows the math. If she bonds to you fully, you lose the old laws. The king is not a king when he is a mate. The pact dissolves by blood right. No more throne. No more walls. You become one wolf alone. Kalen did not blink. The fire popped. He did not look away. If there is no pack, he said, there's no order. And there it is. Sarah sighed. The romantic and the monster. You think love saves things. It only changes the list of what you're willing to burn. She stepped backward once into the rain, then another, her smile finding its place again. 2 nights, Majesty. Let the bond ripen. If you deny it, the girl dies. If you accept, you do. She turned into the dark. 3 shadows ghosted after her, one limping. The door drew itself shut on a gust that tasted like old pennies. Silence returned, stunned and noisy in Mara's ears. Her chest hurt where she'd been holding her breath. The rain, patient again, kept at the roof like fingers on a table. What did she mean? Mara asked, voice scraped raw. If the bond completes, you lose everything? Kalen didn't answer. Not at first. He crossed the room and leaned both hands on the table, head down, as if something inside him weighed more than bone could bear. When he spoke, it was to the wood. The old laws were made to keep kings from using hearts like weapons. If I bind to you fully, I stop being more than one. I become a single body in a world that expects a wall. The pack scatters without a crown. And then the order hunts what's left of us in small pieces. And if you don't bind to me, she said, I die when the moon rises. Yes. The fire found a new pocket of pitch and burned brighter for a second before dimming again. The room breathed with them. Mara touched the back of the chair to steady herself. Her fingers shook. She hated that he could hear it. So either I live and you lose your crown, or I die and you keep it. He lifted his head. The gold in his eyes was not bright now. It was deep, like resin with moths caught in it. There's no crown worth your body in the ground. Don't do that, she whispered. Don't make me grateful. He flinched as if she'd thrown salt. You asked for truth. I asked for a way where I stay me. Kalen pushed off the table and took a step toward her, then stopped as if the floor changed under him. There's a secret I kept back, he said, voice low, because it is the kind that changes the shape of every room you walk into. I am telling it now because the math is cruel and the moon does not negotiate. Mara steadied her breath. Say it. He did not soften the words. Your father wasn't just order. He was mine before he ran. He wore my mark the way you wear it now. He broke from me to save you and your mother. I let him go. The order killed him for the insult and for the theft. A sound left her that wasn't a word. She tasted copper. The walls leaned. You! She blinked hard, vision stuttering. You bonded to my father. Partially, Kalen said. A soldier's bond. Not the one they're trying to force on us. But I put my hand over his heart and told him to live. I failed him later. I will not fail you. The room spun and then steadied. Rain, fire, skin, the shape of his mouth when he said not yet, the way her bones had leaned toward him at the lighthouse, like they remembered his weight. She felt grief move through her like a tide changing direction. Not smaller, different. So, when you saved me in Seattle, she said slowly, you weren't saving a stranger. You were finishing a promise. That, Kalen said, and something I don't have a name for that feels like standing in the sound when the fairy horn blows, and knowing every cell will shake, but you aren't falling. Mar wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. That's the most Seattle metaphor I've ever heard. It's the best I have, he said, almost smiling. Thunder passed farther away. The rain softened again. The bond under her skin hummed, ready for whatever the sky planned. Teach me, she said, and the words were a small bridge thrown between storms. If I'm going to choose, make me choose with my eyes open. He nodded, relief and dread braided in the set of his shoulders. We start now. They moved the table aside. He stood a few feet from her, barefooted on the rug, every line of him listening. You'll think the change is heat, he said. It isn't. It's light. Let it through your ribs and out your spine. Don't lock your jaw. People bite their tongues. It makes the first shift uglier than it has to be. That's supposed to be comforting. It's supposed to be true. He guided her breathing, in through the nose, out slow, longer than felt possible. Her skin prickled like 1,000 small storms under one. Her teeth ached. Somewhere in the deep part of her ears, a low frequency began to sing. The note of the ridge, of the creek hidden in the trees, of some old iron the order had driven into soil decades ago to keep kings tame. Let it pass you, Kalen said, voice close. Don't fight. The first pain came like a hook at her spine, then a second under her shoulder blades. Her fingers stretched as if remembering a different math. She folded, knelt, palms on the rug. The floor tilted. Her breath went wrong, then right, then wrong again then. The world yawned wide. Every smell turned language, pitch and ash and wet earth, and the animal musk of the coat Kalen had thrown on the back of the chair. She heard his heart, separate from his breath, and the minute roughness of his left ankle, where a bone had once healed a little crooked. She heard her own name in the way. He said nothing. Good, he said, and the word struck her spine like a hand. Good. She was not fur. She was not human. She was between, and the between hummed with its own rules. The crescent on her wrist flared white, then red, then settled into a silver that felt like a hand finding another in the dark. After a long minute or a short hour, the pain stepped back. She rolled to sit, shaky but whole. Kalen crouched across from her, his palms open on his knees, as if ready to catch or worship, unsure which. You didn't break, he said, all roughening the words. I wanted to, she said truthfully. I didn't. His mouth softened. That is the difference between a creature and a crown. They were too close. They were not close enough. The room held its breath again. Rain gentled on the roof like forgiveness. 2 nights, Mara said. We go to the lighthouse. We go, Kalen said, but not to kneel. A small, feral smile found her mouth before she meant it to. To end it. To end it, he echoed. He stood and offered his hand. She took it. The bond thrummed, not greedy now, not trying to own, just there, a warmth at her wrist, a weight she understood how to carry. Before the fire sank to ash, before the rain went thin as thread, before Seattle turned its wet face toward another gray dawn, Mara leaned into the space where a life divides and said to the part of her that was afraid, not yet. The storm listened. Far below the cabin, a creek changed its song as 3 iron stakes slid loose from the mud, as if something old had unbit the earth. On a bluff beyond the trees, a woman in a hood watched the cabin like gutter and smiled like a blade catching moonlight. Sarah Whitlock lifted a bone charm to her lips and whispered, 2 nights. On the table beside the door, the black feather Mara had found in the alley and kept without knowing why shivered once, shed a final flake of ash, and revealed, beneath the soot, a sliver of hammered silver, shaped like a key. Mara did not see it. Not yet. But she would. And when she did, she would finally understand why the Lycan king had whispered to a dying girl in the rain that the hour of her ending was not here. Because the secret had never been that she was chosen. The secret was that she was the door. The moon rose early that night, a pale coin trembling through the clouds. It hung above the cascades like something alive, like an eye that had finally found what it was searching for. Mara stood outside the cabin, the forest silent around her. Even the rain had stopped, not a mercy, but a pause. A gathering of breath before the storm changed shape. Inside, Kalen was pacing. His shoulders were drawn tight beneath his coat, the veins in his forearms raised beneath the skin. The light from the fireplace painted him in moving gold, catching the edges of the scars that crossed his collarbone like constellations. She turned toward him. You can feel it too, can't you? His eyes lifted to hers. They glowed faintly, not from the fire, but from the moon seeping through the window. It's closer than it should be. The order is pushing it. Try and call the blood moon early. Mara's pulse thudded. Can they do that? They can hasten what's inevitable. They can make gods bleed before their time. He stopped pacing, every line of him rigid. They want to break you before you choose. She crossed the room and stood in front of him. Then maybe we don't give them that chance. He tilted his head. You mean go to them? I mean finish this. Tonight. At the lighthouse. Kalen studied her face, his expression unreadable. You'd go willingly into the jaws of what's waiting for you. She met his gaze without flinching. You told me once I wasn't meant to die yet. I want to find out why. Something in his face softened, then broke. You sound like him, he whispered. My father. He nodded once. The night before he fell, he said almost the same thing. Then maybe it runs in the family. The fire cracked. A low growl rolled through the woods outside, not close, not far. Kalen turned toward the window, his body tensing instinctively. They're moving, he said. The ridge will be crawling with them by midnight. Then we should go now. He hesitated, the gold in his eyes deepening. "If we go," he said, "there's no coming back to this." Mara glanced around the cabin, the blankets on the chair, the empty mugs, the little life they'd built in borrowed hours. She swallowed. Maybe that's the point. They left the cabin under a sky bruised violet and silver. The forest was thick with fog, the kind that moved as though it were breathing. Every sound, a branch cracking, an owl's cry, the whisper of water, carried farther than it should have. They moved fast. Kaylin's steps were silent. Mara's heartbeat was not. With each mile, the mark on her wrist burned hotter, the rhythm of it syncing with something in the distance, a low hum, steady as a drumbeat. "The order," Kaylin said quietly. "They're calling the moon." "How?" "Blood and names. The oldest kind of prayer." When they broke from the tree line, the lighthouse rose ahead of them, tall and skeletal against the horizon. The beam was dark, the power long since cut, but the top glowed faintly with the light of the rising moon. Mara shivered. The air here was different, thicker, humming. The smell of iron was everywhere. Kaylin reached for her hand. His palm was warm despite the cold. "Stay behind me when we cross the line." "What line?" He nodded toward the ground. Circles of ash and salt ringed the base of the lighthouse. Symbols burned faintly in the earth, runes like the ones carved into the walls of her mother's house. "Wards," he said, "to keep me out, to keep you in." Before she could speak, a voice cut through the air, calm, sharp, too familiar, right on time. Sarah Whitlock stepped from the shadows, her hood down now, her hair dark with rain. Around her stood 6 others, their eyes gleaming red, their presence bending the fog like heat over asphalt. Kaylin shifted, half between forms, his jaw tightening, his breath deepening. Sarah smiled. "Careful, Majesty. The moon's still climbing. You wouldn't want to waste that temper before she arrives." Mara took a step forward. "I came here to end this." Sarah's smile didn't waver. "Oh, darling, that's exactly what we're here for." The red glow of the moon deepened, flooding the rocks with color. The air grew hot. The mark on Mara's wrist blazed white, and she gasped. Kaylin grabbed her shoulders. "Breathe. Don't fight it." Sarah's gaze sharpened. "It's begun." The others began to chant, low, rhythmic, the language older than English, older than the city beneath them. The ground trembled. The ocean beyond the rocks started to surge higher, waves breaking against the cliffs. Mara's vision blurred. The world split, one half in front of her, one somewhere else. She saw flashes. Her father's face, Kaylin kneeling beside him, the moon red as blood above the trees. "What are they doing to me?" she cried. "They're forcing the bond," Kaylin said, "trying to make you theirs before it completes with me. Can you stop it?" He looked at her, pain flickering across his face. "Only if you choose." "Choose what?" "Me," he said, "or the moon." The words hit her like a wave. "If I choose you." "The pack dies," he said. "The order falls with it. Balance breaks. And if I choose the moon, you live, but not as you." Sarah's voice carried through the wind. "He's lying. He's always been lying. He bound you to himself because he needed a vessel. You were never meant to survive. You're just a cage for his curse." Mara's heart hammered. "Is that true?" Kaylin shook his head, but she saw the hesitation in his eyes, the flicker of something unspoken. "What aren't you telling me?" she whispered. He took a step closer, the storm raging around them. "When I marked you as a child, I tied our lives together. If the bond completes, I cease to exist as I am. My body dissolves into yours. You become the vessel for both." Her throat went dry. "You mean you die?" He looked at her, eyes glowing gold, rain streaking his face like tears. "I mean you live forever." For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The waves, the chanting, the firelight, all of it froze between them. She felt the truth like a blade against her chest. He had saved her twice. He had bound himself to her knowing it would cost him everything. "You should have told me," she whispered. "I wanted to give you a choice," he said, "even if it meant you'd hate me for it." Sarah raised her hand. "Enough of this." The air cracked. Bolts of crimson light shot from the ground, circling Mara like a cage. Kalen lunged forward, but the wards flared, throwing him back into the dirt. "Kalen, don't listen to her," he shouted, his voice raw. "You are not their vessel." Sarah stepped closer to the circle, her eyes gleaming red. "You can feel it, can't you? The power waiting just beneath your skin. The moon calling your name. Let him go, little one. You were never meant to belong to a dying king." The words hit something deep inside Mara, a note that reverberated through her bones. The mark on her wrist pulsed in rhythm with the moon. Kalen pushed himself to his knees, blood running down his face. "Mara, look at me." She did, and in that instant, she saw both futures, one where she stood alone beneath an endless moon, untouched by death, untethered by love, and one where the light of him dissolved into her, burning her from the inside out, but leaving her whole. The choice tore through her like lightning. She stepped forward, crossing the burning circle. The light seared her skin, but she didn't stop. Sarah shouted something, words lost to the wind. Kalen reached for her. Mara pressed her glowing palm to his chest. "I choose you," she said. The world exploded. The lighthouse shattered its silence, the beam flaring to life, though no power ran through it. Light poured from Mara's hands, from her eyes, from the mark that had once bound her to him. The ground split, the sea roared, and the red moon turned white. When the light faded, the chanting was gone. The order lay scattered across the rocks, their symbols burned away. And Kalen was gone too. Mara collapsed to her knees. The rain began again, slow, cold, forgiving. She looked down at her wrist. The crescent mark had changed. It was whole now, a perfect circle, glowing faintly with gold. Inside her chest, she could feel a heartbeat that wasn't hers. A voice, faint, warm, familiar, whispered against her mind. "Not yet, little one." She lifted her head toward the fading moon, tears mixing with rain. She wasn't human anymore. She wasn't alone. She was the Lycan king's last breath, and his first rebirth. And the night had only just begun. Dawn didn't so much arrive as seep in, pale and hesitant, as if the sky were afraid to touch what the night had done. A low marine layer rolled in from Elliott Bay, turning downtown Seattle into a watercolor of faint towers and sleeping lights. The ferries cut through the gray like patient animals, horns echoing along the water with the ache of old songs. Mara stood on the rocks below the dead lighthouse, soaked to the skin, the bones in her shoulders aching in a way that wasn't exhaustion so much as rearrangement. The rain had gentled, salt and sweet mixed in the air, the horizon the color of a half-healed bruise. She could still feel the heat of Kalen's last light under her sternum, a steady pulse that wasn't hers and was. When she closed her eyes, she saw two moons, the red one burning away into ash, the silver one widening into something kinder. When she opened them, there was only the flat gray disk of morning. The order had fled with the tide. The wards had burned themselves out. The lighthouse door hung crooked, blackened along the edges, where ritual smoke had licked it. In the debris near the threshold, a small flash of metal caught her eye. She bent and brushed away wet ash with her thumb. The black feather she'd found weeks ago shed its last skin completely, and the sliver beneath it lay clean in her palm at last. A narrow key hammered from old silver, notched with crescent teeth, its bow shaped like a ring of tiny waves. Cold hummed along her fingers. The mark on her wrist warmed in answer. The secret was that she was the door. Her breath fogged the key as if she'd blown on glass. Somewhere inside the lighthouse, a hinge complained to itself. The beam, dead for years, was still and dark. "Okay," she whispered, and the wind laid itself down to hear. "Show me where." The building had the tired grandeur of a washed-up actor. Chip paint, glass eyes, a spine that had been straight for a century and now leaned into the sea. Stairs climbed a tight spiral. Iron smelled like rain and salt. Her fingers slid along the rail, everything inside her listening. At the landing just beneath the lantern room, the mark on her wrist flared so hot she hissed and yanked her hand back. A small iron plate had been screwed into the wall generations ago, no larger than a palm, disguised under layers of paint the color of cloud. She scraped at it with her nail until the head of a hidden keyhole winked at her, old and patient. The key slid in like it was coming home. For a second nothing happened. Then the wall sighed, stone shifting against stone. A panel swung inward to reveal a narrow cavity, just big enough for a box. Cedar that had aged to a soft gray, bound with leather straps that were cracked but intact. The smell rose up, unmistakable and intimate. Storm. Pine. Smoke. Something like the inside of Kaylin's coat when he'd stood too close to the fire. Her throat tightened. She knelt and pulled the box free, set it carefully on the floorboards where sea and sky were a single pale sheet beyond the glass. The straps resisted and then gave. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in oiled cloth, sealed with wax stamped with a crescent. She broke it. A journal. A charm braided of hair and silver thread. A map with roads that no longer existed. And tucked at the bottom, a folded page that crackled when she touched it. Her name was on the outside in a hand that was careful and large. Mara. The paper blurred. She blinked hard and read. Little one, if this finds you, it means the tide turned where I could not hold it. I did not know which side of me would reach you first, the order I was born to, or the man I tried to be after. If Kaylin is with you, the world has done what I begged of it. If he is not, if I am asking this of you in the echo of his absence, then listen first with your blood, and only then with your grief. The lighthouse is a hinge. All things that meet water and light are. Beneath the lens is the hollow, and in the hollow is the crown stone. We buried it here when we were young and more afraid of ourselves than our enemies. The Order wanted it. Kaylin wanted to forget it. Your mother wanted to leave it to the sea. Break it, and both our houses fall. Keep it, and the red moon rises every century stronger than before. There's a third way, but it requires a door. Your father. The room swayed as if the sea had climbed the stairs. For a moment she had to put her palm flat on the floor, cheek bent to her shoulder, and breathe through the heat at her wrist until the world settled. Rain whispered along the panes. The fairies called to each other across the bay with their slow, solemn horns. Below the lantern, under the lens that had once turned the bay into a corridor of instruction, a trapdoor was set flush with the boards. The key turned there too, and the air that rose from the space beneath was colder than the rainy morning should allow. Her muscles tightened along her shoulders and eased again as the bond heat met the cold and found a balance. The hollow was no cavern. It was a short, dark shaft lined in stone that sweat salt and history. At the bottom a pedestal squatted like an altar, and on the pedestal lay a rough shape tucked in wool, no larger than a loaf of bread, heavy as a confession. She lifted the bundle to the gray light and unwrapped it. Not a stone at all, but glass the color of old honey, veined with threads of rust. Bubbles were caught within like a storm preserved in syrup. At its center something darker pulsed faintly, slow and stubborn, the suggestion, if she believed in what couldn't be, of a heartbeat. It doesn't belong to you, a voice said quietly. Mara turned, and for a terrible heartbeat she thought Kaylin stood in the threshold, rain in his hair, mouth set in that way that meant he was bracing for her answer. But the gold wasn't right. It was polished, theatrical, and the smile belonged to someone who liked the idea of knives. Sarah Whitlock leaned against the doorframe as if morning were a bar and she'd just ordered her first drink. Rain had slicked her hair back. A cut traced her cheekbone, thin and bright. Two figures flanked the stairs like shadows that hadn't decided on bodies yet. "You're bleeding," Mara said. Sarah glanced at the wound as if only now remembering it existed. Occupational hazard. Her gaze slid to the amber glass in Mara's hands. Hunger tipped her smile. "You found it." "Go home," Mara said. "Whatever you were building burned with your wards." "You think so small," Sarah said almost kindly. "The Order is a name. Names change. What stands stays. That," she lifted her chin at the crownstone, "is the part that doesn't fall when men do. Give it to me, and you can keep your fairy songs, and your pretty cabin, and the voice in your ribs. I'll even let you pretend you ended us." Mara set the stone on the windowsill as gently as if it were a sleeping child. "This ends today." Sarah's eyes cooled. "You going to crack it with your little fist?" She clicked her tongue. "It doesn't break clean. It spills. Then we clean." Sarah exhaled smoke without a cigarette. Always the romantic in the monster. Mara stepped between Sarah and the crownstone, the wild quiet of the morning sliding into her bones. The mark on her wrist glowed steady, not bright. She was aware of every wet nail head, the grain in the board beneath her feet, the salt drying on her lower lip. She was aware of the absence where Kalen had stood, and of the presence where he lived now. A heat near her heart that wasn't a chain. "You told me once I was a door," she said, half to the room, half to the voice that sometimes woke with her in the middle of the night and said not yet. "You didn't say what I opened." Sarah's smile cut clean. Everything. The decision was simpler than the fear around it. She picked up the crownstone in both hands. The weight sank into her wrists, into the tendons along her thumbs. She thought of the car wreck she didn't remember, and the man who had bent over a crying baby and said live. She thought of her mother's quiet maps and her father's tangle of vows. She thought of fairies and forests and the wet city that had tucked her into its gray ribs and kept her hidden until it was time to burn. And then she lifted the stone to her chest and pulled it in. The cold hit first, biting and perfect, searing the exact shape of the glass through skin and muscle as if she were being branded on the inside. Then heat. Not fire like destruction, fire like kitchens, like old radiators in apartments with cracked windows, like hands held over a stove when the power's gone out. She heard the slow groan of the lighthouse and the impatient, shocked intake of Sarah's breath, and something like a laugh, so deep it wasn't sound at all. Kalen, with you, came back. Not words so much as the sensation of a door unlatching. Not a king. Not gone. With you. The crownstone dissolved as water dissolves salt. The amber went to light, and then to nothing, and what had been pulsing inside it found her own rhythm and fitted itself there as if the space had been waiting since before she was born. Mara opened her eyes. The glass in the lantern room caught the thin morning and bent it into 1,000 soft arrows. The rain had eased to a skin of silver hanging in the air. The smell of iron, strong as a scream, went thin and then thinner, as if a window had been opened in a room that hadn't breathed in 100 years. Sarah's smile didn't break. It rotted. "What did you do?" Mara looked at her, not cruelly. "I ended the math." "You ended nothing," Sarah said, but the confidence had flattened in her voice. "You just moved the crown." "Maybe," Mara said. She stepped forward, and Sarah's shadows flinched before their bodies did. "Maybe the crown isn't a thing you wear or a thing you break. Maybe it's a thing you carry without making anyone kneel." Sarah's hand lifted, palm a little trembling now, and the charm at her wrist glowed red. "You think mercy will outlive winter?" "No," Mara said softly. "I think mercy is winter." She reached, not with her hands. The room altered the way rooms do when someone beloved walks in. Space made way. Sarah's charm sputtered once like a candle in a fairy wind and went out. The two figures at the stairs bled into human and slid down the wall breathless, blinking as if waking from a long, bad prayer. "You can't hold it," Sarah said, but now it was pleading. "The stone eats the bearer." "I didn't hold it," Mara said. "I let it go where it wanted." "Into you." Mara touched the place over her heart. The heat there was steady, ordinary as life. "Into us." The word landed, and somehow the room had more air. Kalen's not voice warmed her bones. A hand at her back that didn't push, just reminded her she had weight and direction. Sarah straightened, found a hard little smile again as if from habit. And when the moon blooms red again, when another zealot threads iron through the soil, when grief gets bored and goes hungry. Mara moved past her to the stair, the morning opening itself like a corridor of rain. "Then we'll answer, not as kings, as keepers." Sarah did not step aside. The floor did. She stood where she stood, and still Mara passed, and in that small humiliation something in Sarah's face cracked that was not pride but history. For a second Mara saw a girl on a wet sidewalk watching a father she worshipped walk into a building and not walk out. She saw older women lay hands on a small head and say, "We'll make sure this never happens again," and then spend a lifetime setting fires in the name of rain. "Who told you I was the little one?" Sarah asked, so softly Mara almost missed it. Mara paused on the top stair. "What?" Sarah swallowed, eyes on the gray shape of the bay, as if she were reading answers there. "When he said it in the alley. Your king. Not yet, little one. You thought it was for you. A smile like a wound opened. He was looking at me. Memory slid sideways, sharp and bright, the alley's wet mouth, the shadow she had seen at the far end that wasn't a man, the low growl, the way the night had held its breath. He saw you, Mara said. It wasn't a question. He spared me, Sarah said. And for a heartbeat there was a person standing where a weapon had been. I wondered for nights if mercy was just a prettier shape of contempt. She didn't smile. Now I know what it was. What? A delay. On the next breath Sarah was gone. No drama, just the absence of a choice. Her shadows had already unlearned how to follow orders. They stumbled after her like men who'd been underwater too long and had only now found the shore. The lighthouse creaked once in relief, as if too many names had finally been taken off its walls. The new days did not announce themselves with trumpets. They arrived like Seattle does everything, steadily, with coffee. The rain kept falling. The ferries kept shouldering their way across a body of water that would have drowned a less stubborn city. Tourists bought flowers at Pike Place Market and took pictures of fish flying from hand to hand, and more than one glanced toward the gray wedge of Discovery Park with a sensation they would later misremember as a draft. Mara stayed. The cabin at the ridge became less a hideout and more a home. A blue enamel kettle lived on the stove. Boots left lines of dried mud by the door. She ran when the fog lifted, barefoot along trails that stitched the forest to itself. At night she slept with the windows cracked, letting the sound of the creek write its argument into her bones. Sometimes, turning the page of a book in the quiet of late afternoon, she'd feel that second heartbeat remind her what had changed, and it never felt like loss. Kalen's laughter, which he'd done so rarely with a mouth, came now in the flicker of the kettle catching the light, in the way the porch boards sighed when she stepped onto them, in the low hum that answered her name when she forgot and spoke into an empty room. When she dreamed, he did not appear as a man or a wolf, but as the weight beside her that meant she was not alone. When fog fell thick and the moon lifted, the forest woke deeper. Small animals watched her with an attention that was curiosity, not fear. Once, at the edge of a logging road gone to ferns, a black bear lifted its head and puffed a breath that was not quite a greeting and ambled on. News of the blood moon order dwindled to rumor, then to memory, then to story. The people who had chanted with eyes turned to knives woke as if from a fever and found their hands empty. Some wrote apologies no one asked them for. A few disappeared into the spaces the city keeps for those who can't yet walk in the same weather as everyone else. Sarah's name became a thing whispered at meetings in basements that smelled of old coffee and betrayed ideals. Then not even that. Mara went to the lighthouse often, never entering without setting her palm against the wall. First the way you greet an animal you have chosen to love. She read her father's journal in pieces, not because the entries were cryptic, they were stubbornly plain, but because the ordinary grief of his handwriting took more courage than monsters ever had. She learned the names of old inlets and the words the first maps had gotten wrong. She walked the catwalk in storms and let the spray kiss her open mouth. On a Sunday morning with gulls heckling the air clean and the light a soft aperture in the clouds, she carried a paper bag of cinnamon rolls from a bakery on Ballard Avenue up to the lantern room and set them like an offering on the sill. "Don't make a habit of pastries." Kalen warmed from the inside, as amused as she'd ever known him. "You'll have raccoons at your door by dusk." "Let them come," she said. "We'll teach them to pay rent." She ate one and left two, and took the third back down for the keeper she'd hired, an older woman named Nora, who wore a yellow slicker like a priest wears a cassock, and who had quietly, efficiently gotten the electricity working without once commenting on the old trapdoor. Nora said lighthouse keepers had always been a specific kind of stubborn holy, and Mara had nodded and given her a key. Late that afternoon, a car she knew wheezed into the gravel lot below the point. Lila stepped out in a rain jacket brighter than the sky and waved up at Mara with both hands like a kid. "You disappeared." Lila scolded an hour later over mugs that steamed like prayers. "Do I have to assume everyone who quits a bookstore because of a mysterious man in a storm has joined a band? Should I be worried?" Mara smiled and shook her head. "No band. Just a lighthouse and a vibe," Lila said. but her eyes softened, and under the joke there was relief. "You look good. Like you finally slept." "I did." They walked the trail to the bluff, where the grass grew in windswept cowlicks, and the bay spread like a giant silver shoulder. Lila slipped her arm through Mara's, the way she always had when the world was too big, and you needed to be a two-person weather system against it. "I had the weirdest dream the night of the big storm," Lila said. "I was in the market, and all the fish were chanting, like in Latin. And then this man leaned down and said, 'Not yet,' and the whole market turned into a forest." She laughed at herself. "My therapist says it's about delayed gratification and impulse control. I think it's about carbs." The words did a small, precise thing under Mara's ribs. She stopped. "What did he look like?" Lila grinned, ready to invent something cinematic. Then her face went strange as some memory aligned. "Not like people look," she said slowly. Like when you're a kid and your dad is 6'2", and you think he's an oak tree that learned to speak." She shook it off with her shoulders. "Anyway, what is this place to you? It smells like a story." "It is one," Mara said. The wind lifted her hair and put it back down. She felt the door in her chest ease a little wider and not be dangerous at all. "Stay for dinner?" "If there's pie." "There's always pie." They turned back toward the light. On the path, small paw prints dimpled the damp earth beside their boot treads. Fox, maybe, or a very self-important neighborhood cat. The sun decided, without fanfare, to show its true face for 5 minutes, and the bay turned to hammered silver under it, and Mara stood very still and let the brightness touch her mouth. "This is what it is," she thought to the warmth beside her that had no edge. "Not a crown. A world that keeps starting." He answered not with words, but with the sense of a forehead pressed to hers, and a laugh that meant yes. That night the fog came in low and soft, not a threat but a shawl. The cabin windows breathed sleep into the dark. The creek told its usual gossip to the ferns. Mara lay on her back under a blanket that smelled like cedar and rain, and watched the ceiling learn the moonlight. When the feeling started, it was so delicate she almost mistook it for the glow of contentment, and turned over. A second heartbeat, not Kalen's old one, not hers, fluttered, tiny and certain, exactly where her hands went when she was surprised or afraid. She froze, not with dread but with awe, like a hand on glass too cold to touch. She pressed her palm there, and the little pulse pressed back, as if answering a door. "Kalen," she said aloud into the intimate dark. His warmth rose, startled, and then already learning her joy. "With you." She laughed and cried at the same time, quiet as if the forest were a nursery, and she didn't want to wake it. Windows wore a thin film of silver. Outside, an owl called once, as if delivering a message it had been keeping for years, and could finally set down. Mara turned onto her side. Hair stuck damp to her temple. The mark at her wrist a steady moon. The new beat nested under the old made room. Everything in her rearranged itself, without panic. Balance is not a thing you force. It's a thing you allow. When sleep came, it came like a tide that loved the shore it touched. She dreamed of a field on the other side of the city. Magnuson Park in late summer. Kids with sticky fingers, making boats of leaves in puddles that refused to dry. She dreamed of a man kneeling in a lane of shade between two maples, his hand steady, his mouth speaking a blessing he had earned by almost not surviving himself. He looked up, and for the briefest slice of time, she saw him, not as a king or a ghost or a vow, but as a boy who had once been told he had to be a wall, who had chosen finally to become a door. Beyond him, at the edge of vision, someone else waited, a woman with rain in her hair and a scar along her cheek where a life had cut her and she had not apologized for bleeding. Sarah Whitlock held something close to her chest and looked at Mara the way enemies do when the script breaks, and they have to decide if they'll learn a new language or go silent. Sarah smiled, a strange, lopsided, human thing, and said, not unkindly, "Not yet, little one." Mara woke with her hand still on the small beat, and the room softly blew with almost morning. She laughed once, breathless, and then very quietly she began to cry. The good kind, the kind that waters a ground you intend to grow something in. Outside, somewhere on the ridge, A wolf lifted its head and sang, but not a warning now. A welcome. Another answered. Then another. The notes braided into something that wasn't a pack call, and wasn't a prayer, and wasn't a siren over Elliott Bay. And yet somehow it was all three. Seattle took a breath and let it out. The storm did not leave. It learned new weather. The lighthouse, no longer a throat for old names, watched the ferries and the gulls and the small brave boats and kept quiet, as a keeper should. And far beneath the lens, in a hollowness that was no longer the hollow, but a room for resting, a hair-thin crack, invisible to any eye careless enough to call it imperfection, traced itself across the stone base, where the crown had once slept. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. Things break. Things mend. Doors open. The night didn't ask for an ending. It asked for attention. Mara listened. She placed her hand over the new heartbeat and said, to the life inside and the life around her and the life that refused to be only one name, not yet.